Thank you for joining me today for a walk in the garden. I'm Liz Davey, and this is a series of gardening and cooking shows on Norfolk Community Cable Television, NCTV. Today I'm starting in the herb garden as I usually do, and I've already cut back some of the herbs. Some herbs get left until spring when they're either cut back or just continue to grow. Others get cut back in the fall. I've already cut back the oregano and the tarragon, and I will work on the lemon balm now. And also most of the mints. We're expecting a frost this weekend, so this is kind of the last opportunity to bring any of the herbs that might perish in a frost. That would include the tender ones that I put in this spring, the fancy leafed geraniums, which are edible, and also the lemon verbena. Those are herbs that are not going to make it once we have a frost. The mint, I have a little bit left. I'm going to cut that off too, but before I cut it off, I'll probably harvest what's left of it and put it in a container in my refrigerator so that I can use it until it's gone. Again, the lime balm can be cut back all the way to the ground. You'll notice many of the herbs will have a little tuft of growth at the base, and you don't cut that off, you leave that. That shows where it's going to come back up in the spring. I don't do anything with the thymes until spring. With the southernwood, rue, tansy, many of these can be left over the winter. They provide a little winter interest, and also they will, if you cut them now, tend to die back if they try to put out any new growth if we get some good weather. I have a lavender over here, and again, I take off the bloom shoots where it is bloomed, if any are left that I didn't pick for bouquets or other uses. And this lavender will just stay right here. It's a hardy lavender. At least it's hardy to probably zone 5 or maybe even 4. Spanish lavenders, of which I have 2 that I left in pots on the patio all summer, are not hardy, and they have to come inside. The Spanish lavender has a little different, it's a long type of bloom, not quite the same as these. They tend to be more pinky in color. If you have one of those Spanish or French lavenders that are not hardy, they need to come inside when the temperature drops below about 20 degrees. And it will be dropping almost that low very soon, if not this weekend. So regular lavenders can stay outside. Some of them I do protect with leaves and baskets, which we'll see about next month, but they will take a little more cold than the fancy Spanish ones. Sage will continue to be here and continue to stay green and useful right up through Thanksgiving until it snows, or even if there is no snow, until the time it is covered with snow. Any basils that are here should be harvested now. They will go the first thing with frost. In fact, if you come out to your garden one morning and want to know if you had a frost or a slight frost, look at the basil. If it's all black, you know that it did frost overnight. Now let's move to the perennial garden. It's time to clean up, and you can see I've already started. I have my little garden cart here, and as I cut the plants back, and I'll be cutting back this heliopsis all the way to the ground. And when you start cutting things back, you also will find a few weeds in there that need to be pulled, and then they won't be there next spring. And you may find some plants you didn't know you had. For instance, I have a echinacea growing down within this other plant, which I can pot up next spring. So I'll leave that in place. As I cut these things down, and I'm also going to cut back all of the lilies, I remove the plant supports. You don't see them because they were covered with foliage, but I will remove these and take them into a storage area back by my garden work table. Things that still have a lot of green I probably will leave. Many of the ones with thin leaves will just die back naturally. Any of the chrysanthemums that I have, I just leave. I do not cut those back in the fall. In fact, I will cover those with bushel baskets and leaves later on, but I will leave them now. I've stopped watering this garden in case we have no rain. I don't come out and give it any additional water anymore. It's time for it to go to bed and be ready for winter. I will make notes of things that I might want to divide in the spring as I go along. This lamb's ear has kind of outgrown its boundaries. That will get transplanted in the spring. And the other thing I'll do is plant bulbs as I go along. We're going to plant a few bulbs in a few minutes in another area. But if you remember, I took pictures last year all the way through. Brought my handy phone out. One good thing a phone is good for, if you have photos on it. I took pictures in the spring. Right now, I have no idea where the bulbs were last spring. I just know I had a lot of them. And I don't want to dig into them when I plant new ones. I want to put some extra ones in, but I need to know where to put them. So that's where the pictures that you took and the notes that you made last spring come in very handy. We still do have a few blooms in the garden. The eupatorium is still in full bloom, so we'll leave that. It will get cut back once it darkens, and probably a frost will do that. Moving down, we have roses and asters still in bloom. Most of these things, the rose, of course, will not be cut back now, and the hydrangea that's back here also will not be cut down until spring, at which point I will cut off just any growth that has not survived the winter. We have lots of asters, chrysanthemums. I will probably be able to divide this large white one in the spring. I know that some of the iris will also need to be divided in the spring. Some of the plants will go. Peonies, again, can be cut back now all the way. And again, the support's removed. And you just cut them all the way to the ground. If you run into any plants that have been bothered by diseases or heavily infested with insects, it would be a good idea to put those in the trash bag and trash them instead of trying to put them in your compost. Otherwise, most of these things can go in the compost and build compost for adding to the garden next year. Again, now we can take out the plant support that was in there and put it away for the winter. I'm also noting things I might want to use in winter arrangement. This is a red twig dogwood, and you can't really see the red twigs yet until the leaves fall off. It's overgrown. It needs to be cut back, and it will be a good thing to cut back this winter when I want to use some of the red stems in holiday arrangements. Other things that I might want to use are hollies and evergreens. So I won't cut those back until later on when I want to use the foliage for different arrangements inside. Another lavender that will stay. I've cut back some of the things and pulled some of the annuals. I had a lot of the flowering tobacco. There's some that's still flowering, but that is gone has been pulled up and composted. Here's another peony. This one's pretty sad. Was attacked by a little downy mildew, and again, we'll just snap that off. Because it was affected by mildew, this one is probably one that will go in the trash bag instead of the compost pile. Trying not to spread disease saves on using any chemicals, which I don't like to use at all. And again, another plant support. By removing the foliage of some of these things, you keep your garden from looking like the dead plant cemetery in about November. Roses, again, get cut back in the spring. Other things, as they brown, will get cut. Sedums. These are another thing that I leave. The foliage, the green part, will be blackened and killed by the frost. It'll all fall off. But the blooms themselves will stay a rusty red color, and they look nice not only in the garden, but you can cut them and dry them for winter arrangements. So definitely we'll leave those here for a while. I have a couple ornamental pepper plants, and those need to be either harvested or dug up in the event of a frost, because again, they are very, very sensitive to colder temperatures. These are edible, so I'll probably be picking all the red and green off of this one. I may decide to dig that one up and bring it inside since there are still some blossoms on it. See if we can get a few more to blossom in the house. The ornamental grasses, I'll leave for a while. I may leave them all winter. It depends how quickly winter follows fall. This is a low-growing sedum. Sedums are succulents, and they come in different sizes and also some different colors. Pinks, reds, and whites mostly. Some purples or deep purple foliage. And they can add a lot of color to the fall garden. We notice we have some bumblebees on this one. The bees' favorite foods are declining rather rapidly, but the sedums provide a lot of pollen for the bees at this time. Now let's go down to the other side of the garden. I have a bit of garden along my driveway, and I'm going to plant some bulbs over there. October's the best time to plant bulbs, and that the bulb purveyors through mail order know that, and they will send you your bulbs right at the proper time to plant, even if you order them back in July. If you do order them in July, you usually get some good prices, and they come in the mail in time to plant them in October. You want the bulbs to be in the ground so that their roots can grow before the ground freezes hard, and they will put on some growth, quite a lot of growth, under the soil that you can't see, but that will help provide nice blooms for next spring. First thing you need to do is remove the pine needles. In this case, we have lots of pine needles here. You use the pine needles on paths and the leaves on the garden. But you need to clear a spot, and you can do that either with a leaf blower, which I like, or you can use a rake. And this is one of the spots that I noticed needed some plants. This is daylily, and this will be pulled out as it blackens, so we have some little extra space here. Clean that up. Now this is a Caryopteris, which is actually a start off of a larger one over a little further in the garden. And the Caryopteris is a fall blooming plant in blue. So we needed a little color over here in the spring, and I decided to plant some hyacinths. So I need to dig down here quite a ways. Most bulbs do not like wet feet, so you shouldn't plant them in an area that water is going to stand in the winter. This little area is a good area. It sits a little higher. There's quite a lot of sand in this soil right here, so the hyacinths should be fairly happy. There are also some rocks, which we will remove as we go. There's good reason there are so many rock walls in New England. It was easier to build a wall than to move the rocks out of the fields. Hyacinth bulbs are fairly large, and you want to bury the bulbs about 3 times as deep as they are large. So I need to go about this deep with this bulb. Roots on the bottom, pointy end up. And I'm going to put 3 in this area. These are one that is called Woodstock, and it blooms in a deep red color. I find them quite attractive. It's a reddish, deep reddish purple. We'll put in 3 bulbs and then fill back in around them. I don't add fertilizer now. If I add it at all, I'll add it in the spring. The bulbs generally contain what they need to grow. Move a few of these rocks out. Pat it down well. Then I'm going to put a few more of the pine needles back over it so that any creature that might dig them up doesn't know I even was here. Most hyacinths and daffodils are not bothered by squirrels and chipmunks. They do bother the crocuses, which I am also going to plant. I plant a few crocuses every year, and I do have some lost chipmunks. Usually crocuses in an area where you don't have a lot of squirrels and chipmunks would be returning every year. Hyacinths and daffodils will return every year, and they aren't too much bothered by the chipmunks and the squirrels. Sometimes you can plant daffodils and crocuses together, and that may help protect some of the crocuses. The daffodils are poisonous, and you don't want to have those eaten. I'm going to go over to this area now and plant a few crocuses. They don't need to go as deeply. And that's fortunate because there are a lot of roots from the crabapple that's above this. We'll go down a few inches. The crocuses that I'm going to put in here are called ruby giant, and they're a Tomasianus variety. They bloom early, and they also spread, and I'm hoping to have them spread throughout this area. Squirrels are not supposed to like them. We dropped one. Then we'll plant about 10 of these here, and I have 10 more to plant someplace else. But I have had squirrels and chipmunks get into them. And I'll just space these around 3 or 4 inches apart. I tend to plant my bulbs a little bit closer. The idea is to avoid planting bulbs in little rows. It looks very artificial. You want bulbs to look almost like they just sprung up and weren't planted. I'm going to add a little soil over these. And then I have a pot that I had on the patio this summer, and I have in it some pansies, and I noticed that they went to seed. So I have some small pansies in here as well. These are very shallow rooted, and I'm going to plunk those in on top of the crocuses. I'm not sure whether they will come back next spring or not. They very likely will, depending on our winter. And if they do, I think they'll look really nice with the crocuses that I just planted. So I'll just move this around and use some of the soil in here as well. There are some small hostas planted in this area. You can cut the hosta foliage back now. However, if you wait about a week after it's been frosted, you'll find that it just pulls out of the ground very easily. So I usually wait until it's all brown, and then it just pulls out. You don't have to bother using the clippers. Saves a little time. Again, I'm hoping that the pansies may also serve to protect those crocus bulbs from the chipmunks. And we'll see what happens in the spring. We may have a nice design with purple crocuses and the purple and yellow pansies. Now it's time to go into the vegetable garden. As I said earlier, we do collect the pine needles. You might as well use what you have in your yard. The leaves will be putting on the garden after they've been mowed. We catch them with the lawnmower and then add them to the garden, and they'll be plowed in a little later. And the pine needles will refresh the paths around the garden. They suppress the weeds, and I could buy chips, but I have tons of pine needles that can be used. So we're going to use the pine needles around the garden. I also use them on several other paths. Again, use what you have. It will save money and prevent filling up the landfill. The other thing I collect are the pine needles, and I've been out, pine cones, and so I've been out collecting pine cones. I have a bag full. These I'll put in the shed and let them dry well, and they can be used again in holiday decorations or other craft projects. So we're using what we have available here. I'll probably pick some seed pods of other things too, even some of the wild things that are around the edge of the garden that can be used in winter arrangements. Look around, you might be surprised what you find in your own yard. We're still able to get tomatoes, cherry tomatoes. The larger tomatoes are gone, but I'm still able to pick cherry tomatoes, and again, a frost will take all of those, so I will harvest as many as I can. Any green tomatoes, I probably will harvest and make green tomato mincemeat, which is made with apples and tomatoes and spices. And there are some small green tomatoes, but I'll probably just use the larger green tomatoes for that. Broccoli is still going strong. Even some of it's going to seed, which we won't use. But any of this can be picked and consumed. So again, I will harvest that very soon because it's going to seed. And this will last through a frost. It will stay here until the temperature goes way down into the 20s. And I'll be able to pick this and use it. Sometimes right up till Thanksgiving, we've been able to get broccoli. The nice part is that the insects will be gone. And so we don't have to worry so much about that. Carrots can be dug, beets. The arugula also stays, as does the parsley. Kale sometimes is even sweeter after a frost. The Brussels sprouts this year did not make substantial sprouts. We have a few small ones, but I think our lack of rain kind of contributed to not having too many Brussels sprouts. I have the second planting of beans that I've been picking. They too will disappear as soon as the frost, as will my lovely zinnias and nasturtiums. They do not make it, they are not hardy. Some of the calendulas may stick around for a while. They're a little more hardy, but most of the flowers will need to be picked this weekend and brought in for a large bouquet while we have it. The same is true of the dahlias. I leave the dahlias here, and they're actually blooming quite nicely right now. And they'll stay here until a frost blackens their foliage. I've been cutting off the spent blooms as the summer goes on, but they have a lot of buds. However, they will go with the frost. The foliage will darken. At that point, I will be able to dig them up, dry the roots or bulbs underneath, and hopefully save them over the winter in a cool spot. We'll probably be doing that in another 3 or 4 weeks. A while back, in fact several months ago, I started some cuttings of shrubs. Some of my shrubs, I took cuttings from the ends. Well, I can't leave them out for the winter, and I really don't want them inside for the winter. I have plenty of things inside for the winter. So I'm going to pop these out. They are hardy shrubs. This is a hydrangea. I'm going to plant them right here. This is kind of a little sheltered area. And I'll be putting all these in. This one has more than one, so I'll divide those up. Pop them out. They have rooted, made small roots. I'll water these in. The This will definitely not be their final location, but hopefully they will make it through the winter. Several hydrangeas. They could go pretty much any place in the garden, but I wanted to stay out of the way of the tiller when we till up the vegetable garden, and I really don't have room in the flower garden, so along this fence seemed to be a good spot. We've got those planted. We'll stow away the pots. And then I will be putting straw or pine needles over these shrubs. They will need to be mulched for the winter. So I'll put a fairly heavy layer of pine needles over them a little later on. And hopefully they'll make it through until spring, at which time I can transfer them to a permanent location in the yard. Moving up this way, the potting area I've pretty much cleaned out. The potting soil's been moved out to the garden shed, and most of the pots, besides these, have been cleaned and put away. These I will clean and also put away. Clay pots are stored in the garden shed. Plastic pots go in the back in a garbage can, closed can, and then they'll be ready to use either in the winter or in the spring, if I can get to the can in the winter. I take a few pots, leave a few in the house for repotting small things inside, but most of them stay in a garbage can all winter or nearby, tipped over so that ice doesn't collect in them and break them. Any clay pots do go into the shed because they are prone to breakage. If they fill with water, it freezes and then they'll crack. Now let's go back to the potting shed and pond area. Several weeks ago on the show we covered the pond with netting. You can see that it was a good decision because now it's keeping some of the leaves out of the pond. Hopefully we'll be able to blow some of them off if I tighten it up. I periodically do bring it back and tighten it up a little bit. We get a nice wind and a lot of them do blow away, but it does keep them out of the pond, which aids in the cleanup effort in the spring. You'll notice the waterfall is not running. I've removed the pump, the waterfall, and the skimmer, and those have been washed and put away for the winter. The fish are going to be just fine. They're going to be going into a state of dormancy. On warmer days, like today, I can give them a little food, but they really don't need much food and care until spring. However, they do need an air hole once the water freezes. So I do have pond heater, and that's going to go right into the pond probably about this weekend. We'll stick this in and it floats. We want it kind of up near the edge of the pond. I'll plug it into the house, and what I plug it into is called a thermocube, which is a thermostatic plug, and it goes on at 35 degrees and then it goes off at 45 degrees. So if it's under 35, it will indeed be on and it will melt a hole in the ice. I will have to come out here if the snow gets this high and shovel it off occasionally, but doing this, these fish have been here probably about 10 years. As long as they have a little hole in the ice, it allows the vapors to exchange from the pond. The decaying leaves do cause some gases to form, and those need to escape, otherwise the fish will die if it ices over completely and they're kind of locked in. So all you need is just a little hole in the ice, and this is the way to do it. The thermocube helps because you don't really want it on when the day is 60 degrees. You're wasting electricity. So this gives you the thermocube when you need it, the pond. I still have lots of cuttings in here. And I even took some more from a geranium. I actually cut the foliage off the geranium, and I will pot up all of these plants, and they'll come inside, and it's time to bring things in. This is the filter material that I removed from the pond. It was out here drying. That too will go inside because I think the mice might enjoy it over the winter if I don't bring it in. I do have problems with mice here in the winter sometimes, so we don't want anything in here that would provide good mouse house material. Any remaining cuttings are being potted up, and we're going to bring them inside. And those will go under the lights. In fact, I'm going to bring them in right now. Most of my plants are inside. A few are still out here, and I grouped them. These are the caladiums that were scattered around the shade garden, and the foliage will go with the first frost. At that point, I can dig them or just cut them off and bring them in for the winter. I have a bedroom that's unused, a guest room, and I will be bringing them back in to that room, which stays fairly cool. If I had a cellar that stayed cool, that would be the ideal spot. My shed, unfortunately, because it gets a lot of sun, heats up during the day and gets very cold at night. It's not a very good spot to overwinter the plants. My front entry is unheated. I do put the lavenders in there, the tender lavenders, and I watch the temperature to bring them in if the temperature in there goes very low. Some of these others, the pineapple plant, eucomis, and the caladiums will go in that back bedroom, as will all of the roots that I dig up and put on peat moss. I spread down a piece of plastic and they stay in there for the winter. So far it's worked fairly well. The bougainvillea is still in full bloom. I hate to cut it back, but the time has come. So I will be cutting it back in spite of its blooms, just enough so I can get it through the door because it needs to come in for the winter. It's happiest in California, and certainly we aren't in California with that climate, so it needs to come in. I also have a lemon that will come in and be there for the winter. The next thing is to clean the shed, put away some of the porch furniture, and continue getting ready for winter. One more thing is it's time to get your bird feeders ready to go if you don't feed all summer. Some people feed birds all summer. I tend to let them forage for themselves for the most part in the summer, and I use hanging plants on the hangers for my bird feeders. So I have gotten my feeders out. Once my hanging plant is killed by the frost, I'll be putting out my bird feeders filled with seed, and they will be here on the patio for the birds. And it takes a few weeks for the birds to find them, but once they do, you have to keep them filled all winter. So we'll start doing that within the next 2 weeks and then continue through the winter. They come to expect the food, and you need to have it out there for them. Now we'll take these plants in and put them under the lights and hopefully keep them going. Some of them have more than one start in the pot, and those, as they grow larger, can be transplanted to make 2 plants. I have a light shelf, and I have trays. Actually, I use boot trays on this, which are nice because they will hold some water once you water the plants. And I'm going to put these under the lights. I don't have the lights too close at this point, and they'll continue to grow here, and I'll keep watering them. You can see I've brought in a lot of plants, and so now my job is to keep them watered. And that will be something we do all winter. They're all on saucers, so that if they leak a little bit, usually it isn't a big disaster. But I will be keeping all of these things watered as we go through the winter. The room gets varying amounts of sun. This area tends to be quite sunny, so I put some of the things that really like the sun over here. Others towards the back, it's a little cooler in that back corner. So some of the things that I want to go semi-dormant go back there. You kind of have to play with your room. This is a very hot area because there's a heating duct underneath it. Plants tend to dry out a little fast, but they also get more warmth. And this is where I brought my basil plant that we dug up a few weeks ago. And so I'll still have a little basil to use, as long as I keep it watered and picked. Now, let's see what we can do in the kitchen with some of the things that we've are harvesting from the garden. A few few weeks ago we harvested the beans that had dried in the pods. These were beans that were planted, specific varieties, cannellini, black beans, and these are rattlesnake beans or speckled beans. And these are beans that are specifically planted to make dried beans, whereas you leave the pods on until they dry, and then you shell out the beans themselves. You can soak and cook these then all winter. I like to, after we've shelled them out, bring them inside, let them dry a little bit, and then I'm going to put it in the oven at about 175 degrees for about 10 minutes. This so-called pasteurizes them, but it serves to kill any insects that might have stayed around in the beans or near the beans, and I just feel better about keeping them that way. After they've pasteurized, I'll cool them, put them into plastic bags, and store them in my freezer until I'm ready to use them. In case they aren't quite dry, this will preserve them. If I feel they're really fully dry, they can be stored on the shelf. And we'll be cooking with those a little later on. Also, to preserve things, kale. Kale is one of the things we enjoy, and it seems a shame not to enjoy it when the snow flies. So this kale has been washed, and I've pulled out the big stems in the middle, washed and dried, and now I'm going to blanch it. You've possibly heard about blanching vegetables prior to freezing, and there's a reason for doing that. Some people do freeze vegetables for a short time without doing it, but by blanching it, there are enzymes in the vegetables that cause them to ripen and then cause them to over-ripen, which results in rotting. It's the natural way of things, and these enzymes are part of the vegetable. They're supposed to be there. And what we want to do is inactivate those enzymes so that the vegetable won't keep ripening after it's picked. And to do that, we very, very briefly will plunge it into a boiling water bath. And I'm going to do that right now. And stir it down a little bit to make sure it's all covered with the boiling water. And it only needs to stay in there for a very short time. I use my spaghetti cooker, and that seems to work pretty well. Now we want to plunge it into an ice water bath, and I have the ice and the water in the sink here, and we'll plunge that into the ice water, and we'll have to pour it in at this point. But we want to, as quickly as we heated it, we want to cool it. It seems like a lot of work for kale, but it does give a superior product by doing it this way. And the next thing I'll use is my salad spinner. Once the kale has cooled down in the ice water bath, I'll put it into the salad spinner. The next thing is to get it completely dry. We want to avoid putting ice in there with it. Just put it all into the spinner, and we'll give it a few spins. Having it completely dry eliminates a lot of the ice crystals that might form in it. And that has dried it fairly well. I think it needs a little more. And I think I will also pour out the water that's collected. And spin it a few more times to get as much water out as possible. Now I'm going to spread it out on a very clean kitchen towel and further dry it. You notice it still retains a nice green color. We didn't cook it to pieces. It's still somewhat crisp. And I found I can even use this frozen kale to make kale chips, which I was surprised. I thought I would have to use it all in soup or other cooked items, but roasting it for kale chips works just fine with the frozen kale. I'm going to leave it on the towel and let it cool completely. And then I can pack it into a plastic bag. And let's get rid of this pot too. So. Once it goes in the plastic bag, it'll go in, be labeled and go into the freezer, and we can use it all winter. The next thing I'm going to make is a cheese appetizer, cheese spread. And the recipe was for double this amount, and because it needs to be chilled, I cut the recipe in half, and I'm doing half at a time. So I'm going to actually end up with 2 smaller versions of the same recipe. But I will give you the full recipe, which called for 2 packages of cream cheese, and 1 stick of butter, a whole can of chopped pimentos, which have been drained, ten ounces of shredded cheddar cheese, and I decided, since I'm doing kind of a Halloween theme here, that I'll use some yellow cheddar. And then they also called for 1 envelope of salad dressing mix. But I'm using a garlic and herb salt-free seasoning instead, and I'll give it a good teaspoon or so of that seasoning. You could also spice it any way you preferred. If you'd like horseradish in it to make a horseradish cheese spread, that would probably be pretty good too. At this point, the cheese and the cream cheese and the butter were softened, so we can mix it with the mixer. And I'm going to mix it until it's really fully incorporated, mixed really well. I'll scrape down the beater, and then this needs to chill for a while before you form the cheese log. At this point, if you just want the cheese spread, you want it quickly, you can put it in a bowl and consume it right away. It's ready to go. And if you do a full recipe, you get quite a lot of cheese spread for, say, a large tailgate party or a Halloween party. So this is going to go right into the refrigerator. And I'll bring out the one that I made earlier and chilled. I saved out about a tablespoon of the mixture. And since this is going to get a little messy, I thought I'd put on my gloves. The idea here is to shape it into a witch's hat. And you do need it chilled in order to work with it a little better. I'm going to divide it into 2 pieces. And the first one I'm going to shape into a base, kind of a round base of the hat, brim of the hat, in the middle of the plate. The next part we want to shape into a cone shape. I'm going to kind of roll it and scrunch it down and then make it into a hat shape. Hopefully, and we'll put that in the middle. So this is a pimento cheese spread, witch's hat. And you can make it as tall as you wish. Again, this is half a recipe. A full recipe would make a very large witch's hat, almost full size, I think. Now, in order to turn it black, remove the gloves, and I want to put poppy seeds on it. And this is where a bit of messiness comes in. I can sprinkle them on. They stick pretty well. But you notice my plate is getting covered with poppy seeds. So I'm going to use a brush Brush off the heaviest layer. Maybe put a few more up. Now at this point I could use a spatula and shift it to another plate. Or I can just brush off the extra poppy seeds onto a pan. And I did save out a little of the cheese mixture. So that I can use it around the edge to make a hat band. Put a little on it, and then I have carrots to put on that. And we'll just put a little carrot hat band on it. And the last thing that we need for this is some crackers around the edge. And we have a little Halloween party hors d'oeuvre. Again, the cheese itself is nice just served in a bowl or formed into a log. This is just a bit special for the holiday. We'll set that over there. Next thing I want to do are some Halloween cookies. And this is cookie dough that I made before, and you could just as easily, I believe, use purchased sugar cookie dough. And what I did was divide the sugar cookie dough into 3 pieces. One piece I left white, and I put that in the bottom of this loaf pan, which had the sides filled with parchment paper. You could use also wax paper. On top of that, I tinted some orange and put that on top, and the last third, I tinted yellow with the food color and put that on top. We're going to make some candy corn cookies. This has been chilling in the refrigerator, and I'm going to cut it in approximately 1/4 inch slices. Now that it's chilled. And then each slice can be cut crosswise into candy corn shaped pieces. These are small cookies. Can be eaten more like a handful, I think, than an individual. Again, I used a homemade sugar cookie dough, but I think the purchased ones would probably work just as well. These will go in the oven for approximately 9 minutes at 375, or whatever your sugar cookie recipe calls for. Because they're smaller than a normal sized cookie, they might not take as long. When they're finished, I had already done a few slices, you roll them in sugar and they come out looking like this. Nice little candy corn shaped cookies. Now we need a main dish to go with our cookies and our hors d'oeuvre. So I'm going to be making black bean and pumpkin soup. And we'll turn on the heat and put some olive oil in the pan, about a tablespoon. So many soups start this way, with oil, and then a cup of onions and 4 cloves of garlic. I'm going to let that stir around a little bit in the pan just to get a little cooked but not brown. And while that's stewing it, I'm going to use the blender to blend. It calls for 2 cans of kidney beans, and I'm not sure I can do the whole thing in one batch, so I'm going to do it in 2 batches. It might work with this blender in one, but I'm not sure. Blender tends to work better on this. And we have 1 can of drained cubed tomatoes. Again, I'm going to do half at a time here. and chicken broth. Total of 3 cups, but I'm just going to add a little bit to it this first time. And we'll blend that while our onion and garlic is cooking. That's pureed pretty well. Down a little bit. We're going to add some spices as we go to the mixture that's in the pan. And I'm going to add cumin. There has been a recall on some of the organic cumin. So it calls for 2 to 3 teaspoons of cumin. So depending on how much you like it. I'm using a ½ teaspoon because that's what fits in the jar. We put in 2 teaspoons. We want some black pepper, and we want about a ½ teaspoon of that, so I'll give it a few good shakes. And I'll stir these spices around as they go in. One to 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika. This is more available now than it has been. And I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of that because we liked it. The smoky flavor should add a good flavor to the soup. And I'm going to add some chipotle pepper, which is now, again, more available. And we want about a ¼ teaspoon or more, depending on how much heat we want in the soup. So I'll do a heaping ¼ teaspoon of that. We're going to want to salt it to taste. We don't like a whole lot of salt in our food, so I'll just add a few shakes. Again, stir these in a little bit. I'm going to add a little more oil to it. I'm going to add the pureed vegetables. And we'll finish doing them. This is a fairly quick soup. And the ingredients are often found in your pantry if you have the spices, or you can use just regular spices instead of the smoked, and any type of pepper that you have. At this point, I'll add the rest of the chicken broth, which is 3 cups total, and 1 can of pumpkin. I'm going to stir that in well. I'm going to put that back on the stove to heat up and bring it to a simmer. It really doesn't need to cook much more. Almost everything has been cooked. And our cookies, I think, are about done. I'll take these out and roll individual cookies in sugar while our soup heats up. You can add them to the plate. They will cool quickly. And the great thing about using parchment paper on your cookie sheets is that when you're finished, you just roll it up, throw it away, and you can put your cookie sheet away once it cools down. One more garnish I'm going to make for the pumpkin soup. This is for Halloween. I'm going to add a little pumpkin to some yogurt. I want to give it kind of an orange color. Seems to be doing it. This soup can be garnished with chopped tomato, chopped cilantro, chopped green onions, all kinds of things. I'm going to add a little bit of water to thin it down. going to put it in a squeeze bottle to decorate the soup. These are great to have. They work for decorating cookies. They work for all kinds of things, decorating plates. Just making a little today. But this is basically Greek yogurt. You could also have used sour cream, which would have been good with it. And we're ready to serve the soup. It's nice and hot. It's a very dark colored soup, so this garnish will add to it. Again, for Halloween, it's appropriate to have something like this that's dark and kind of spooky. Spooky, smoky soup. And what I'm going to attempt to do is make a spider web. So I'll make some concentric circles. And then use a skewer to kind of draw it out to make a web pattern. You're on your own for the spider. I'm not going to put that in. And there's our Halloween menu. Black bean, pumpkin soup, witch hat cheese spread, and pumpkin cookies and candy corn cookies. We need a spoon. And the last thing I want to do is make a flower arrangement for this table. I'm going to start with a clear glass jar, and this is a pretty simple arrangement. And I'm going to put 3 mini pumpkins in it, stacked up. Then I've bunched together some of the broom corn that I grew and the Sweet Annie. You could just as easily use some sort of twigs from your garden or weeds that are dried. We're going to use the pumpkins to kind of hold the floral arrangement in. Spread it out a little bit. And I have a couple of floral tubes. These tubes come in arrangements that you might get from a florist, and they hold water and hold the flower. And because I have pumpkins in here, I really don't want to put water in the bottom. But I have a very pretty dahlia that kind of complements the whole thing, but it needs water. So I'm using one of these tubes to hold the dahlia in place. So we have our arrangement, very easily done. You can also put a small wreath on top. There's an arrangement down at the public library right now done by a garden club member that uses a wreath on top of a whole glass container full of mini pumpkins. So it makes a nice little arrangement for fall. And it's a little taller than most, but it gives a little fall glint to the garden. And of course this flower isn't going to last forever. In fact, it's not going to last very long at all, but you can replace it easily enough. You can use a piece of sedum. If you put sedum in, you don't have to use water and it will just dry in place. So that would last probably until Thanksgiving. You might have to replace the pumpkins, depending on how warm or cool the room was. And that's our little Thanksgiving meal. And I'm Liz Davey. You've been watching NCTV, A Walk in the Garden, and I thank you for joining me.